To Americans, Afghanistan seems more than a world away, culturally, religiously, and governmentally. Afghanistan seems just a distant enemy embroiled in war, a war that most of us, if not all of us, don't understand. The government is different, and therefore so are the people. But how specifically do the differences between law and government practices in the US and Afghanistan affect the daily lives of citizens? How different are we? The Afghan government is an Islamic republic that consists of similar branches of government to our own republic system. The difference comes down to the legal system. While Americans value the separation of church and state, at least most of the time, the Afghan government punishes people according to Sharia law. Sharia means path in Afghanistan and is a combination of the teachings of the Quran and the beliefs of Islam. The law mainly affects marital statuses and punishments for breaking laws. These punishments are often dictated by religion. The Constitution of Afghanistan guarantees equal rights to men and women, and religious freedoms for all. However, the actual impact of the Afghan and US government on the people can differ drastically from what official documentation promises. Since the Taliban left, it is true that the Afghan government has allowed increased freedoms for the people. Businesses that were forced to close down while the Taliban was in power have been reopened. Musical instruments can be sold again. Phone cards are sold in the streets, and once banned cell phones are permitted. Newspapers and radio stations have grown and are now available to many. There is even a television show similar to American Idol called Afghan Star. In cities such as Kabul, many parts of life are quite normal. Children, including girls, go to school. People go to work and are able to access such basic necessities as water and food. But in all parts of Afghanistan, there are problems with violence and freedoms that the government either ignores or causes themselves. Afghanistan is still one of the most impoverished countries in the world. 80% earn less than $1.25 per day. This is caused largely by the after effects of decades of war and the volatility of many areas of the country. In one of the villages, the vines which supported the entire town's economy were burned by the Taliban. Many skilled laborers are unable to find work. Most of them go to Kabul seeking a job. The cities offer better security and have better economies due to more foreign investors. However, not everyone can work in the city, and there are many unemployed laborers in urban areas. For example, there is a surplus of doctors in Kabul and not enough in rural regions. One day laborer said, "My kids are crying. They had nothing to eat this morning. Now I have nothing to take back to my children." Throughout Afghanistan, there is a major problem with security. While many people in the US do live in areas with high crime rates and problems with gang violence, regular suicide bombings and kidnappings do not occur here. Many of the people in Afghanistan live in constant fear of terror. This leads to a quality of life considerably lower than that in the US. Kidnappings occur frequently on the major road in Afghanistan, but only the richest can afford to take a different road. The Taliban frequently threatens teachers at girls' schools. One business owner will not allow those with loose-fitting clothing into his restaurant for fear of concealed weapons. But this man has a good reason. Nearly every day, someone dies from a bombing. Efforts to improve security in Afghanistan have become nearly impossible. These days, the many impoverished people in Afghanistan are at high risk of joining terrorist groups. Limbs and bodies literally have prices. You can be hired to blow yourself up. Cutting off the funding of the Taliban and other terrorist groups is nearly impossible. They take money from opium, a sector that accounts for 1/3 of Afghanistan's economy. While efforts have been made to shut down opium production, closing it is dangerous and could further damage an already hurt Afghani economy. The infrastructure of Afghanistan is struggling too, despite the large amount of foreign aid that has been put into it. There are open sewers, and running water is not available to most. Roads are filled with potholes, and many go unpaved. This poor transportation system makes it difficult to get food and other supplies to rural regions. Corruption runs rampant in all levels of the government in Afghanistan and regularly affects the daily life of the people. In the U.S., corruption is also frequent, but mostly just in the higher levels of the government. Campaign donations from major insurance companies, government official tax fraud, the Watergate scandal, and the disputed 2004 Bush-Gore elections are all examples of possible corruption. However, most Americans do not encounter corruption every day. In Afghanistan, bribery is often needed to get a driver's license renewed or get a new job. Policemen need to be paid often as well. There is also such a thing as official corruption, which the government invented to keep certain illegal traders in business. Today, women in Afghanistan have very few rights. While it is true that American women are paid less than men, did not have the federal right to vote until 1920 and have never been elected as president. Today, American women cannot be illegally beaten by their husbands, can run for political office, and are generally regarded with equal rights. In Afghanistan, this is not the case, despite a constitution that promises equal rights for men and women. You can see this by looking at the story of Miriam. At age 11, she was forced to marry a blind 41-year-old man. When she could not conceive a child, she was beaten. The law did not intervene. Eventually, she ran away to one of the few women's shelters in Afghanistan. There have been many other similar cases of injustices. For example, 2 separate women were publicly beaten for allegedly eloping. According to a 2009 UN report, public assassinations of women are on the rise. 2 other women that lived in the province of Oshan fled their homes due to domestic violence. Oshan is operated as big-time criminal Fazul Ahad's fiefdom with the government's full support and knowledge. Fazul Ahad apprehended these 2 women and forced them to return to their abusive homes. Some of the women resort to suicide to escape abusive marriages. In 1 year, 90 women lit themselves on fire due to domestic violence. 55 of these women died from their burns. In 2009, the Shia personal law was passed. This legalized marital rape, though it was later amended somewhat after international pressure was put on the Afghani government. As we can see, many of the supposed new thoughts on women's rights are almost completely theoretical in Afghanistan, and women are frequently abused.